Captain Vex's studied the holographic display floating above his command chair, 4 eyes narrowing as he examined the target profile. The human looked ordinary enough. Average height for their species, brown hair, unremarkable features. Just another soft-skinned biped from the 3rd planet in the Sol system. "This seems too easy," muttered Lieutenant Kraytok from the weapons station. The Zephyrian's tentacles twitched nervously as he spoke. "Command wants us to bring in 1 human? We could capture 100 of these creatures without breaking stride." Vexahari's mandibles clicked in agreement. The Korvaxi Empire had been expanding across this spiral arm for 3 centuries, and humans had proven to be among the weakest species they'd encountered. No natural weapons, thin skin, limited strength, and short lifespans. Most surrendered the moment they saw a Korvaxi warship. "The bounty is substantial, though," observed Navigator Shiless, her scaled hands dancing across the star charts. 50,000 Imperial credits for 1 human. That's more than we made on our last 6 missions combined. Vexhari examined the mission brief again. The target was currently residing on a frontier colony called Haven's Rest, a small mining outpost on the edge of human territory. The planet had no military presence, no orbital defenses, and a population of less than 5,000. The human went by the name Marcus Chen and worked as a security consultant for the mining operation. "Security consultant?" Vexhari snorted. "What could a human possibly secure against anything more dangerous than a stiff breeze?" The crew of the Void Stalker shared his amusement. They were veteran hunters, each one worth a dozen of any human soldier they'd ever faced. Their ship was a state-of-the-art Predator-class vessel, armed with quantum disruptors and phase shields that could withstand anything in the human arsenal. "Bring us to Haven's Rest," Vexhari ordered. "Full stealth approach. We'll be in and out before their primitive sensors even register our presence." The ship's engines hummed quietly as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Haven's Rest hung before them like a brown and blue marble, its single moon casting long shadows across the mining installations on the day side. "Scanning the surface," reported sensor operator Blix Noor. "I'm reading standard mining equipment, a small spaceport, and approximately 4,700 life signs. No weapons signatures above personal defense level." "Perfect," Vexhari said. "Deploy the scanning drones. Find our target and plot the most efficient extraction route." The drones launched silently from the ship's belly, their advanced sensors penetrating the planet's atmosphere. Within minutes, they had mapped the entire settlement and identified their target. Marcus Chen was currently in a cantina on the outskirts of the main colony, apparently enjoying what humans called alcohol with several other colonists. "Target acquired," Blix Noor announced. "He's alone, except for civilians. No security detail, no weapons visible." Vexhari studied the drone footage. The human sat casually at a wooden table, laughing with his companions as if he didn't have a care in the universe. It was almost insulting how relaxed he appeared. "Take us down," Vexhari commanded. "Landing Base 7 appears to be unoccupied. We'll use the cargo transporter to beam him directly to our holding cells." Lieutenant Kraytok's tentacles writhed with anticipation. "Should we eliminate the witnesses?" "Unnecessary," Vexhari replied. "By the time they realize what happened, we'll be halfway back to Imperial space. Humans are notoriously slow to respond to threats." The Void Stalker descended through Haven's Rest's thin atmosphere like a predator stalking its prey. The ship's adaptive camouflage made it nearly invisible against the star-filled sky, and its sound dampeners ensured complete silence. As they approached the colony, Vexhari couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment. After years of hunting dangerous criminals and enemy agents across the galaxy, this felt like hunting domestic animals. Where was the challenge? Where was the glory? "Landing complete," announced the pilot. "All systems green. Transporter is locked onto the target." Vexhari stood from his command chair, his massive frame towering over the bridge crew. At 8 feet tall and covered in chitinous armor, he was an impressive sight that had struck fear into countless enemies. This human wouldn't even have time to be afraid. "Begin transport," he ordered. The familiar hum of the matter displacement beam filled the air as quantum fields locked onto their target. On the main screen, they watched as Marcus Chen suddenly vanished from his seat in the cantina, leaving his drinking companions staring in confusion. "Transport complete," reported the transporter chief. "Target is in holding cell 3. Vexhari smiled, showing rows of serrated teeth. "Signal Imperial Command. Tell them we have the package and are returning to base." What none of them noticed was the brief flicker of concern that crossed Navigator Schillis's face as she reviewed the mission parameters one more time. Something about this assignment felt wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. In holding Cell 3, Marcus Chen sat quietly on the metal bench, looking around his new surroundings with calm interest rather than the panic they expected. He seemed almost amused. "Corvaxi," he said softly to himself, recognizing the ship's design from the cell's viewport. It's been a while. 3 hours into their journey back to Imperial space, the first anomaly appeared. "Captain," sensor operator Blixnur called out, his voice carrying an edge of concern. "I'm detecting an unusual energy signature from holding Cell 3. Vexhari looked up from the tactical reports he'd been reviewing. "Define unusual." "The human's biosignature is different than expected. His heart rate is completely stable, brain activity shows no signs of stress or fear, and there are some energy readings I can't identify." "Probably just their primitive medical implants," Lieutenant Kraytok dismissed. "Humans are obsessed with augmenting their weak bodies." But Navigator Schillis felt her scales prickle with unease. She'd been studying human behavioral patterns during the flight, and nothing in their psychological profiles suggested this level of calm in a kidnapping scenario. Humans were supposed to be emotional creatures, prone to panic when faced with superior predators. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Imperial Intelligence." "Put it through," Vexhari ordered. The holographic image of Director Kalthex materialized above the command console, his scarred face grim with urgency. "Captain Vexhari, what is the status of your mission?" "Complete, Director. The human is in our custody, and we're en route to the rendezvous point." Director Kalthex's expression darkened. "Captain, we need to discuss the target's identity. This transmission is encrypted Level 9. Clear your bridge of non-essential personnel." Vexhari felt a chill run down his chitinous spine. Level 9 encryption was reserved for the most sensitive intelligence matters. He gestured for his crew to leave, keeping only his senior officers. "Captain," the director began once the bridge was secure, "Intelligence has discovered additional information about your target. The human you've captured may not be who he appears to be." "Explain," Vexhari demanded. "Marcus Chen is an alias. We believe the individual you've captured is actually a former human special operations soldier, specifically one who served during the Centauri conflict 15 years ago." Lieutenant Kraytok's tentacles writhed. The Centauri conflict was barely a skirmish. Human forces were decimated within days. "Not all of them," Director Kalthex replied grimly. "There were reports of a single human operative who continued to operate behind enemy lines for months after the official surrender. This individual was responsible for the destruction of 3 Imperial supply depots, the assassination of General Zorthak, and the complete elimination of the 47th Assault Battalion." The bridge fell silent. The 47th Assault Battalion had been comprised of over 200 elite Corvaxi warriors. The idea that one human could eliminate an entire battalion was absurd. "Surely that's impossible," Schillis whispered. "The reports were classified," the director continued. because High Command believed they would damage morale. But the evidence is conclusive. After 6 months of operations, the human simply vanished. No body was ever found. Vexhari felt his confidence wavering. What was this operative's designation? Director Qualthex paused before answering. The enemy forces called him many things. Ghost, Shadow. But the most common name was... The transmission crackled with static, and for a moment they couldn't hear the director's words. Repeat that, Director. The Reaper, came the reply, clear and sharp. They called him the Reaper. At that moment, the ship's lights flickered. Then the gravity generators stuttered, causing several crew members to momentarily float before the system stabilized. What was that? Vexhari demanded. Blixnur's face had gone pale. Sir, the energy readings from holding cell 3 just spiked dramatically, and... He paused, checking his instruments again, and the containment field is showing signs of degradation. That's impossible, Kratok protested. Those containment fields can hold a rampaging Thraxian bear. Captain, came a new voice over the intercom. It was Security Chief Morgath from the detention level. You need to see this. The main viewer switched to the security feed from holding cell 3. What they saw made Vexhari's blood run cold. The human sat exactly as he had before, but now there was something different about him. His posture was relaxed, but there was an aura of barely contained violence that seemed to emanate from his still form. More disturbing was what he was doing with his hands. Marcus Chen was methodically disassembling the cell's environmental controls with nothing but his fingernails, each movement precise and efficient. Components that should have required specialized tools came apart under his touch like they were made of soft clay. How long has he been doing this? Vexhari asked. We don't know, Morgath replied. The modifications are so subtle that our sensors didn't detect them until now. But, Captain, he's not trying to escape. He's modifying the containment system. For what purpose? Unknown. But whatever he's doing, he clearly knows our technology better than he should. Navigator Shilas studied the readings flowing across her console. Captain, I've been analyzing the mission parameters. The bounty for this human came through unofficial channels. No Imperial seal, no proper authorization codes. What are you saying? I'm saying someone wanted us to capture this specific individual, but I don't think it was the Empire. On the screen, Marcus Chen looked up directly at the security camera. For just a moment, his eyes seemed to glow with an inner light that shouldn't have been possible. Then he smiled, not the expression of a frightened captive, but the cold smile of a predator who had just realized the nature of his prey. He spoke a single word so quietly that the audio sensors barely picked it up. Soon, the containment field flickered and died. Emergency alarms began screaming throughout the ship as backup systems struggled to compensate. In the chaos of red warning lights and blaring sirens, Captain Vexhari realized with growing horror that they hadn't captured their target. Their target had allowed himself to be captured, and now he was loose on their ship. Security Chief Morgath led a squad of 6 heavily armed Korvaxi warriors toward the detention level, their plasma rifles charged and ready. These were experienced soldiers who had stormed rebel strongholds and conquered entire systems. One escaped human shouldn't pose any real threat. That confidence lasted exactly 37 seconds. The first sign of trouble was the silence. The detention level should have been filled with the sound of alarms and emergency lighting, but instead they found corridors shrouded in darkness. Emergency power strips provided the only illumination, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Spread out, Morgath commanded through his comm unit. Maintain visual contact with your squad mates. The human can't have gone far. Private Vexthul took point, his thermal sensors sweeping the corridor ahead. No heat signatures detected, Chief. Either he's found a way to mask his body temperature or... The sentence ended in a gurgled scream as Vex Thul was yanked upward into the ventilation shaft above. His plasma rifle clattered to the deck, still warm from his grip. "Contact!" Morgath shouted. "Eyes up! Secure those vents!" But as his remaining soldiers raised their weapons toward the ceiling, the lights went out completely. Emergency power died throughout the section, plunging them into absolute darkness. In the blackness, they could hear movement, not the heavy footsteps of armored boots, but something lighter, quieter, like death itself was walking among them. "Night vision active," Morgath ordered, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late. Something struck Private Corwex from behind. The warrior's death cry was cut short by the wet sound of his throat being opened. Then silence returned, broken only by the soft drip of blood on metal flooring. "He's picking us off," Sergeant Texmari whispered into his comm. "How is he moving so quietly?" "Because," came a human voice from somewhere in the darkness around them, "you're not hunting me. I'm hunting you." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Morgath spun in a circle, his weapon searching for a target, but the thermal imaging showed nothing but the cooling bodies of his fallen soldiers. "Impossible," he breathed. "Humans don't have natural camouflage. Your species lacks the biological adaptations for stealth." "You're right," Marcus Chen's voice replied, seeming to move through the walls themselves. "We don't have natural camouflage. We have something better." "What's that?" "We have imagination." Another scream echoed through the corridor as Private Shulkan died somewhere in the darkness. His plasma rifle discharged once, the energy bolt illuminating the passage for a brief instant, but revealing nothing except empty air and spreading pools of dark fluid. On the bridge, Captain Vex Hari watched the security feeds with growing panic. One by one, his security team's life signs were disappearing from his screens. The detention level had become a killing ground, and somehow a single human was systematically eliminating his most experienced warriors. "How many are left?" he demanded. "2," Blixnor reported, his voice tight with fear. "Security Chief Morgath and Corporal Nexavith." "But, sir, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations throughout the ship. The human seems to be accessing our computer systems." "That's impossible. Our encryption is quantum level. No human technology can—" "Captain," interrupted Navigator Shylus. "He's not using human technology. He's using ours. Look at these readings." She transferred her data to the main screen. The information showed systematic intrusions into ship's systems, but not from any external source. The access codes being used were Corvaxi Imperial military protocols. "He knows our systems," Vex Hari realized with horror. "But how?" "Because during the Centauri conflict," came a new voice over the ship's intercom system, "I spent 6 months living inside captured Corvaxi vessels. I know your technology better than most of your own engineers." The voice was calm, conversational, as if Marcus Chen was discussing the weather rather than hunting down an armed security team. "By now you've probably figured out that someone hired you to bring me here." "What you haven't figured out is that someone was me." Lieutenant Kraytalk's tentacles writhed in confusion. "That's impossible. The bounty came through Imperial channels." "I've been watching your crew for 3 months," the voice continued. "You have a reputation for taking high-value targets with minimal questions asked, perfect for what I needed." In the detention level, Security Chief Morgath and his last remaining soldier pressed themselves against the wall, weapons trained on the empty corridor ahead. They could hear footsteps now, slow, deliberate, approaching from the direction of the cell block. "Chief," Corporal Nexavith whispered, "my weapon's power cell is nearly depleted. I've been firing at shadows." "Save your ammunition," Morgath replied. "Wait for a clear shot." A figure stepped into the dim emergency lighting at the far end of the corridor. Marcus Chen walked toward them with his hands empty and visible, no apparent weapons, no armor. He looked exactly like the unremarkable human they had captured hours earlier. "There!" Morgath shouted. "Fire!" Both Korvaxi warriors unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts at the human figure. The energy beams struck their target dead center, and Marcus Chen's form flickered like a holographic projection before dissolving completely. "Hologram," Nexavith breathed. "No," said the real Marcus Chen, standing directly behind them. "Misdirection." The last two members of the security team died before they could turn around. On the bridge, the crew watched their final security personnel's life signs fade from the monitors. The ship fell silent, except for the hum of the engines and the soft beeping of instruments. "Captain," Blixner reported in a shaking voice, "he's accessed the armory. Weapons Locker 7 has been opened." What was in Weapons Locker 7? Experimental plasma charges, enough to breach the hull. Navigator Shiles looked up from her console with growing alarm. "Sir, he's not heading for the escape pods or trying to signal for rescue. He's moving toward the engine room." Captain Vex Hari felt his world collapsing around him. Everything they knew about human capabilities, everything they believed about their own superiority, was proving to be a deadly illusion. "What does he want?" Kratok asked desperately. The answer came through the intercom in Marcus Chen's calm, steady voice. "I want you to send a message to your Imperial Command. Tell them the Reaper is no longer retired." The lights on the bridge began to flicker as power fluctuations spread throughout the ship. In the distance, they could hear the sound of controlled explosions as someone with expert knowledge began systematically dismantling their vessel from the inside. Captain Vex Hari stood in his command center, surrounded by the remaining skeleton crew of his ship. Half his personnel were dead, his security force was eliminated, and his vessel was being systematically torn apart by a single human who moved through their sophisticated warship like a ghost. "Sir," Navigator Shiles reported, her voice hollow with defeat. "Main power is down to 30%. Life support is stable, but he's rerouted primary systems through secondary conduits. If he wanted to, he could depressurize the entire ship." "Why hasn't he?" Lieutenant Kratok asked, his tentacles trembling. "He could have killed us all by now." "Because he wants us alive," Vex Hari realized. "He wants witnesses." The turbolift doors opened with a soft hiss, and Marcus Chen stepped onto the bridge. The crew spun toward him, weapons drawn, but he simply raised his hands and smiled that same cold expression they'd seen on the security monitors. "Easy," he said in perfect Korvaxi dialect. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be floating in space." Up close, they could see the changes in him. His movements were fluid and precise, like a predator who had spent years perfecting his craft. There were new scars on his hands and arms that spoke of countless battles, and his eyes held the kind of cold calculation that only came from surviving the impossible. "What do you want?" Vex Hari demanded. Marcus walked calmly to the central command station and began accessing the ship's communication array. His fingers moved across the Korvaxi interface with the familiarity of someone who had spent years studying their technology. 15 years ago," he said while working, "your empire made a mistake. You thought humans were weak because we don't have natural armor or claws or energy weapons. You thought our short lifespans made us irrelevant." The communication system came online, and Marcus began broadcasting on multiple Imperial frequencies simultaneously. "But you underestimated something important about my species. We don't just adapt to survive, we adapt to win. When you conquered our colonies and enslaved our people, you created something your empire had never faced before." "And what's that?" Shiles asked, despite herself. "Humans with nothing left to lose." The main screen activated, showing the face of Director Kalthex from Imperial Intelligence. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to absolute terror as he realized who was speaking. "Director," Marcus said pleasantly, "I believe you've been looking for me." "Reaper," Calthex breathed. "You're supposed to be dead." "Death has a way of being exaggerated in your reports. I've spent the last 15 years studying your empire, learning your weaknesses, mapping your supply lines, and identifying your key personnel." Marcus gestured to Captain Vex Hari and his crew. "These hunters thought they were capturing a retired security consultant from a mining colony. Instead, they've given me exactly what I needed: access to an Imperial vessel with full communication capabilities and a direct link to your intelligence network." The director's face paled to an even lighter shade of gray. "What have you done?" "While your crew was busy dying, I uploaded a little present into your ship's computer core. A virus, you might call it, though it's more sophisticated than anything your programmers have seen." Marcus touched another control, and data streams began flowing across the screen. "Every classified file in your intelligence database, every tactical plan, every secret base location, every agent's identity, it's all been copied and transmitted to human resistance cells across the galaxy." "That's impossible," Director Calthex protested. "Our quantum encryption was designed by the same engineers who built this ship," Marcus interrupted. "Engineers whose vessels I've been living in for months at a time. Your quantum encryption is only secure if you assume your enemy doesn't understand it." Captain Vex Hari felt the last of his world crumbling. The human resistance was crushed years ago. "No," Marcus corrected gently. "It went underground. We learned patience from species like yours. We learned to think in centuries instead of decades. And we learned that sometimes the best way to defeat a superior enemy is to make them defeat themselves." The ship's sensors suddenly detected multiple hyperspace signatures appearing throughout the system, dozens of contacts, all broadcasting human identification codes. "Impossible," Kraytok whispered. "The human fleet was destroyed." "The human colonial fleet was destroyed," Marcus agreed. "What's arriving now is something different, something your empire helped create through 15 years of occupation and oppression." On the screen, sleek vessels emerged from hyperspace, with designs unlike anything in Imperial databases. They moved with the deadly efficiency of ships built for one purpose: war. "Meet the Human Liberation Fleet," Marcus announced. "Every ship crewed by people who lost families, homes, entire worlds to your empire. Every captain trained by veterans of the Centauri conflict. Every weapon designed specifically to counter Imperial technology." Director Calthex's transmission began breaking up as his connection was jammed by the approaching human vessels. "The Emperor will never—" "The Emperor," Marcus said, cutting him off, "has bigger problems now. By the time your forces respond to this system, my virus will have spread through every Imperial network it touched. Your secret bases will be public knowledge. Your agents will be compromised. Your tactical advantages will be gone." He turned to face Captain Vex Hari directly. "You're going to return to Imperial space. You're going to tell your superiors exactly what happened here. And you're going to spread the word that the age of easy Imperial expansion is over." "They'll never believe it," Vex Hari protested. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "They will when human ships start appearing at every Imperial outpost from here to the galactic core. They will when their inferior enemies begin taking apart their fleets with weapons they don't understand. They will when they realize that 15 years of peace wasn't the Empire growing stronger, it was humanity learning how to win." The Void Stalker shuddered as the human vessels took defensive positions around it. None of them fired, but the message was clear. The Corvaxi ship existed only because Marcus Chen allowed it to exist. "Your engines are functional," Marcus said, walking back toward the turbo lift. "Your life support will last until you reach Imperial space. Consider this a professional courtesy from one soldier to another." "Wait!" Navigator Shylas called out. "Why are you letting us live?" Marcus paused at the threshold of the lift. "Because every empire needs to understand when it's time to stop expanding and start negotiating. Your people have a choice now. Learn to coexist with species you once considered inferior. or continue fighting a war you can no longer win. The lift doors began to close, but his final words carried clearly through the bridge. Choose wisely. The next time we meet, I might not be feeling so generous. As the human vessels escorted the damaged Void Stalker to the edge of the system before allowing it to jump to hyperspace, Captain Vex Hari realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's balance of power had just shifted, and the Korvaxi Empire would never be the same. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of the Reaper had begun.